Today we're with Dr. Mark Stephenson, who's Director of Dairy Policy Analysis at the College of Agriculture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome, Mark, to Dairy Business News.
Well, thank you, Joel. Happy to be here. It's a nice day here in Wisconsin.
And the weather is gorgeous here, too. Last week, you spent much of the week in California at producer meetings on the topic of the federal milk marketing order, the possible federal milk marketing order for California. Can you share some impressions of how that week went?
It was a good and an interesting week for us, Joel. My colleague Andy Novakovich and myself were out there, and we've had experience, of course, having lived and worked in areas where federal milk marketing orders are the norm for us. And as California is thinking about this, it was a good opportunity to talk to producers in California and try to help them understand what some of the differences between the current state system and the federal milk marketing order system would be.
Because of your experience across the country, as you look at the proposed California order as put forward by USDA, do you see differences with what might be in place in other parts of the country?
Well, actually, I think the surprise was that as much of it was similar to other areas as they really are. Federal orders are big on having what's called uniform provisions for many federal orders. So, for example, the way that a Class 3 milk price, which is milk used for cheese, is calculated is the same everywhere in every federal order from, one end of the country to the other, and it would be in California as well. There are also a lot of things like provisions for pooling, who gets to pool and who doesn't, how do you qualify for the pool and how do you not qualify for a pool. And California had requested, or at least the co-ops from California had requested some things such as mandatory pooling, and that was something that AMS did consider, but they couldn't do it at the end of the day, and they provided them the same opportunities to be enticed into the pool or to not pool as manufacturing milk would want to. So it was mostly similar with other federal milk marketing orders, not that it was so much different.
And as no doubt was discussed, and as you're aware, California producers had previously voted to accept a maintenance of the quota program organized by the California Department of Food and Agriculture, preparing for the possible positive vote.
Yes, and that is something that we don't have in other orders. So that would be one difference, that the federal milk marketing order did indicate for any milk that was pooled, you would be able to take the value of that quota contribution out of a federal order pool and put that into the California quota pool to be paid out to producers. So that's certainly one aspect that is unique to California.
The part of your presentation that I think had folks at the meeting I attended at least on the edge of their chairs was your calculations of what the California milk marketing prices might have been in 2017 had the federal order been in place, obviously compared to the state system that was in fact how California producers got paid. Can you perhaps just touch on some of the highlights of your calculations and what the result was?
Sure, happy to do that, Joel. The calculations that we do are sometimes referred to as a mock pool because obviously you haven't had the experience out there yet of seeing how much milk is pooled in California and what products are actually going to be made in what volumes, that type of thing. So you can't just do that kind of calculation without thinking about it some. I did have information on products that plants in California are producing, and I did have information that I've assembled over the years on milk intakes into those plants. And so that allowed me to estimate what the pools would likely be. And we did look at this, and when you do the calculations, it looks like a small improvement in the California prices to producers if they had a federal milk marketing order in place. Now, it's not dollars. It's not that kind of size or magnitude of improvement, but it is big enough to be certainly of real interest to California producers. I did the calculations and looked at how the payments would be by zone. So for a dairyman, it matters where their milk is delivered to as to how much they would actually be paid.
Certainly. And since the meeting, based on questions that were asked, you've even done a little bit more additional calculation, if I understand correctly.
I did. I went back in and refined the calculations that were done. Initially, when I did the quick pool examples and at the meetings in California, I had not included a location adjustment that is a part of every federal milk marketing order pool. In some areas, those location adjustments are not large. It did turn out that that location adjustment was about 26 cents in the California pool. So it was big enough to pay attention to. That would have added an additional 26 cents to the calculations that I had done before. So the improvement's better.
And as we know, our U.S. industry doesn't operate in isolated sections. Can you speculate or share with us a little bit of your insight on what might happen in other federal order areas if indeed the California producers do vote to join the federal order system?
Sure, and an important consideration for everybody. And so I think that what matters is how do folks in California react to the federal milk marketing order? In other words, is the improvement in price enough to stimulate more milk production? If that's the case, then more milk production in California would keep downward pressure on prices elsewhere and impact other market opportunities. If it were a federal order that was placing some restrictions on producers and they didn't want to make as much milk, then I think that you could look and see that probably we would expect not as much dairy product to be produced, and it might be a benefit to producers outside of California. Now, just on the borders, on the fringes of California, there will also be some changes made. The current state milk marketing order does not have authority to price milk coming into California. They can impose standards, but they can't impose the prices across state borders. But a federal order can do that. So milk that would be coming into California would be priced on the California order. And, you know, that can change the game just a little bit too.
Very interesting. Well, as we know, the deadline for voting is coming up here pretty shortly on May 5. We'll all be watching to see what the decision is. We thank you very much for sharing your insights with us, and we look forward to perhaps talking with you as the decision is made. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, John.